What if I told you that the fate of Europe once rested in the hands of a single family? One man famously declared, "He who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire. And I control Britain's money supply." That was Nathan Rothschild, a name that still sends shivers through financial history. The Rothschilds weren't merely wealthy bankers. They were the invisible architects of markets, governments, and even wars. Their influence reached far beyond money. It shaped nations, altered policies, and decided the outcomes of conflicts. At the height of their power, not a single politician or monarch dared to move without their tacit approval. But this story is not just about wealth. It's about vision, strategy, and an uncanny ability to turn circumstance into advantage. It begins with a young man named Mayer Amschel Rothschild, born in 1744 in a cramped, narrow alley of Frankfurt. This alley, crowded with over 3,000 Jewish residents, was more than a home. It was a crucible of limitation. Every day was a lesson in survival under restrictions. Jews were forbidden to leave their homes at night, barred from public gardens, coffee houses, and certain streets. Social interaction was limited. Gatherings of more than two were prohibited. For Mayer, life was a constant reminder that the world considered him an outsider, and yet, fate intervened. The death of his parents forced him to abandon his plans to become a rabbi, the role his family had envisioned for him. Instead, he took up an apprenticeship in a local banking house, a pivot that would set the stage for global influence. In that crowded office, Mayer was introduced to the world of finance in all its forms. He studied rare coins from ancient civilizations, Rome, Persia, and Byzantium, objects prized by European elites. He learned to assess value, trade delicately, and understand the hidden currents of wealth. These lessons were more than practical skills. They were seeds for the empire he would one day build. By the time Mayer was a young man, he had joined his family's trading business, working alongside his brothers. Soon he became a successful dealer in rare coins, his acumen drawing attention from powerful figures. Crown Prince Wilhelm of Hesse recognized his talent and appointed him as a court factor, a Jewish financier officially serving the nobility. For Mayer, this was more than an honor. It was a doorway to escape the confinements of his youth and lay the foundation of a family dynasty. Mayer's vision extended beyond personal gain. He instructed his sons to establish branches of the family business across Europe, in key cities such as London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt. Two principles guided him: prioritize relationships with ruling houses, and ensure each son could carry the family legacy forward. This strategy wasn't just expansion, it was risk management. By spreading their operations across the continent, the Rothschilds insulated themselves from the whims of any single ruler, market collapse, or political upheaval. Mayer understood what few did: money alone is power, but its placement determines influence. What began in a narrow alley in Frankfurt became the blueprint for a transcontinental network. Mayer's combination of intellect, ambition, and foresight laid the groundwork for what would become the most powerful banking family in Europe. From the coins of ancient empires to the financial corridors of modern capitals, the Rothschilds were poised to change history. And it all began with a single young man, stepping into the world of finance not by inheritance, but by necessity, and turning necessity into opportunity on a scale that no one could have imagined. By the early 1800s, Mayer Rothschild's sons had established branches across Europe: London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt. But their true test came with Europe in chaos. The Napoleonic Wars weren't just battles of armies, they were battles of money, logistics, and information. And in this arena, the Rothschilds thrived. Nathan Rothschild, stationed in London, emerged as the family's master strategist. While armies clashed across the continent, Nathan was orchestrating a financial campaign that would change the very rules of war. He invested early in British bonds, anticipating the ebb and flow of the conflict. Even as Napoleon won early victories and market panic sent bond prices tumbling, Nathan seized the opportunity, purchasing them at deep discounts. When news of Britain's victories finally reached the market, he sold those same bonds at enormous profits. But his brilliance went beyond simple speculation. Nathan built a network of couriers, spies, and informants, ensuring he received intelligence faster than governments themselves. At the Battle of Waterloo, he learned of Napoleon's defeat a full day before the British government did. With that knowledge, he could time his trades with perfect precision, turning information into power. and power into fortune. Meanwhile, on the continent, Jacob Rothschild in Paris subtly limited his support to Napoleon, while Nathan simultaneously increased financing for Wellington. This dual strategy ensured that, regardless of which side prevailed, the Rothschilds stood to gain. Their influence wasn't about favoritism, it was about foresight, calculated risk, and survival. Of course, their maneuvers came at a social cost. Napoleon had extended protections to Jewish communities, ending centuries of systemic discrimination. Yet for a prominent Jewish family to financially support his enemies, even strategically, was perceived as betrayal by many in France. Intellectuals and emerging nationalists began to associate the Rothschilds with capitalism, transnational influence, and the growing economic inequalities of the Industrial Revolution. They became symbols of wealth and power, their very existence a target for public frustration. Still, the family's fortune surged. Nathan and his brothers diversified into government securities, industrial stocks, railways, coal, and iron. They were no longer just coin dealers. They had become financiers of nations, architects of the Industrial Revolution itself. The family's wealth was liquid, nimble, and immune to plunder or political seizure. Real estate and tangible assets were limited. The majority of their fortune flowed through bonds, stocks, and debt instruments, fluid capital that could travel wherever opportunity arose. This was the Rothschilds' genius. They turned the uncertainty of war into opportunity, transforming every crisis into a chance to consolidate wealth and influence. Their strategy was subtle, almost invisible, yet profound. Wars became profit engines, markets became tools of power, and every political shift was a calculated variable in a broader design. By the mid-1810s, the Rothschild network had evolved into something unprecedented. 5 linked branches across Europe acted as the first truly international banking empire. Through strategic alliances, careful diversification, and unmatched foresight, the Rothschilds weren't merely surviving Europe's storms, they were shaping them. Mayer Rothschild's vision of spreading the family across nations, aligning with ruling houses, and prioritizing financial agility had been realized. His sons were executing strategies that combined intelligence, risk management, and an unerring sense of timing. The Napoleonic Wars, which devastated millions, became the crucible in which the Rothschilds' global power was forged. And yet, the story is not only about money. It's about influence, about the unseen levers that guide history. It's about a family that understood the language of power long before most statesmen did, and used that knowledge to ensure not just survival, but domination, financial, political, and social. This was the era when the Rothschilds transformed from regional financiers into architects of global markets. And the blueprint they created during these wars would define their operations for generations to come. Their wealth wasn't just in coins or bonds, it was in strategy, foresight, and a network that no emperor, general, or politician could ignore. By the mid-19th century, the Rothschilds had moved far beyond the battlefields of Europe. Nathan Rothschild's network in London had become the epicenter of a financial web that stretched across continents. The family was no longer simply bankers, they were kingmakers, industrial investors, and silent architects of global trade. One of their most consequential moves came in Spain, where Nathan secured the rights to mercury mines. Mercury was essential for refining gold and silver, giving the family near monopoly control over a critical resource. This was more than a business transaction, it was a strategic foothold, a way to shape entire markets from behind the scenes. The Rothschilds also strengthened ties with ruling powers. In London, Nathan gained exclusive contracts with the Bank of England and the Royal Mint, controlling the refining of gold and silver. Such influence allowed the family to operate at a scale most could not imagine, using wealth to reinforce power, and power to generate even more wealth. Yet, the Rothschilds' vision extended beyond finance. They invested in railways, coal, iron, and metallurgical industries, helping fuel Europe's industrial revolution. Their capital flowed into ventures that transformed cities, economies, and technologies. While others viewed these industries merely as investment opportunities, the Rothschilds understood their broader strategic value. Control over essential infrastructure meant influence over entire economies. They also invested in global trade. Companies involved in oil, non-ferrous metals, and later energy giants such as Royal Dutch Shell saw Rothschild investments. Their reach was no longer confined to Europe, they were shaping markets in America, Africa, and beyond. Through their financial networks, they supported industrialists like John D. Rockefeller. By financing key ventures and providing strategic advice, they helped consolidate the oil industry into what would become Standard Oil, a company that dominated global energy markets. At the same time, the Rothschilds were patrons of culture and science. They collected rare art, funded expeditions, and supported scientific research. Libraries, galleries, and museums across Europe benefited from their wealth. Their legacy included not just coins and bonds, but knowledge, discovery, and cultural enrichment. In Frankfurt alone, they managed dozens of charitable foundations, funding hospitals, orphanages, schools, and homes for the elderly. Philanthropy became part of the family's identity, balancing immense wealth with societal contributions. The family's financial influence also directly affected nations. After France's defeat by Prussia in 1871, it was the Rothschilds who provided massive loans, stabilizing the French government. In Britain, their funding of the Suez Canal Company reduced voyage times to India dramatically, boosting trade across the empire. Similarly, they backed explorers and entrepreneurs, like Cecil Rhodes, whose diamond ventures in southern Africa were intertwined with Rothschild investments, cementing their dominance in the global commodities market. By the early 20th century, the Rothschilds were no longer just a banking dynasty, they were a transnational force. Their wealth was fluid, adaptable, and politically powerful. While some viewed them with admiration, others feared their influence, associating them with the rise of industrial capitalism, global commerce, and inequality. Yet, the family continued to thrive. Their fortune was reinvested, diversified, and shielded from the uncertainties of politics and war. Even as nations industrialized, revolutions erupted, and empires collapsed, the Rothschilds' network endured. They weren't invincible, but their foresight, liquid assets, political connections, and strategic investments allowed them to navigate storms that would have sunk lesser empires. In this era, the Rothschilds weren't just observers of history, they were participants, often invisible yet profoundly decisive. Wars, industrial booms, and geopolitical shifts became opportunities. And through every upheaval, the family's influence grew, quietly shaping the world in ways most people never noticed. By now, it was clear, the Rothschilds' power was not in a single vault, nor in a single city, it was in strategy, information, and global connectivity. They had become an enduring force, bridging finance, industry, culture, and politics, their legacy set to influence generations to come. As the 20th century dawned, the Rothschilds' reach extended into nearly every corner of finance and industry. But even the most powerful empires faced challenges, and theirs was no exception. Wars, political upheaval, and internal dynamics tested the durability of a dynasty that had once shaped the fate of nations. Despite threats of anti-Semitic violence, the family's foresight in keeping wealth primarily in liquid assets, stocks, bonds, and debts, protected them. There was nothing for mobs to destroy, no tangible fortune to seize. Their wealth moved with the world, untouchable, adaptable, and secure. Nathan Rothschild's London branch became the crown jewel of the family. Beyond banking, it controlled rights to essential commodities like gold and silver refining, and even strategic mining operations in Spain. The family leveraged these assets to influence markets globally, while continually reinvesting profits into railways, energy, and emerging industries. Their influence reached beyond Europe. The Rothschilds supported industrialists in America, including John D. Rockefeller. Through strategic investment, guidance, and access to capital, they helped Standard Oil consolidate its power, turning individual opportunity into global dominance. Similarly, their support of international explorers and entrepreneurs shaped colonial and industrial ventures in Africa and beyond, including backing figures like Cecil Rhodes and the diamond trade, reinforcing their presence in global commodities. The Rothschilds also left an enduring cultural and philanthropic footprint. They funded art collections, scientific expeditions, libraries, hospitals, orphanages, and schools. Generations of the family contributed not only wealth but knowledge, education, and infrastructure to communities, balancing their financial power with social influence. In Frankfurt alone, more than 30 charitable foundations reflected their commitment to societal development. Yet, time and circumstance brought decline to certain branches. The Naples Bank shuttered in 1863 after political upheaval in Italy. Frankfurt's original branch closed in 1901 due to a shortage of male heirs. Vienna suffered under the rise of the Nazis, with family members imprisoned and properties confiscated. Paris was nationalized under a socialist government in 1982, ending the Rothschild presence in that city's banking scene. Across continents, wars and revolutions reshaped the landscape, but the family's central network in London endured. Despite setbacks, the Rothschilds remain a global force. In 2008, their holdings were reorganized under a single corporate entity, unifying centuries of family businesses across finance, real estate, mining, energy, and philanthropy. Today, their assets span dozens of industries worldwide, including wineries, energy, and international finance. Even the original bank founded by Nathan continues to report billions in revenue. Demonstrating enduring resilience and strategy, their total combined holdings are estimated at over $1.2 trillion, a testament to centuries of foresight, diversification, and calculated risk. Yet beyond the numbers, the Rothschilds' influence persists in subtler ways, shaping markets, funding innovation, and participating in the institutions that govern modern economies. The true impact of the Rothschilds is perhaps most visible in history's ripple effects. One young man's forced departure from religious studies, one apprenticeship in a small Frankfurt banking house, one decision to spread sons across Europe, all of these seemingly small events redirected the flow of wealth, power, and global politics. Napoleon's campaigns, Britain's financial dominance, the rise of industrial empires, and even the modern contours of global trade were subtly guided by their influence, and yet, their story is not finished. Even after wars, revolutions, and nationalizations, the Rothschilds continue to shape finance, culture, and philanthropy. They remain a living reminder of the power of foresight, strategy, and disciplined ambition. Their legacy proves that wealth alone does not shape history. Vision, timing, and the ability to act when opportunity strikes are what truly leave an indelible mark. From a narrow alley in Frankfurt to the boardrooms of the world, from rare coins to global commodities, the Rothschilds have demonstrated that power is not always visible, but it is always profound. And though their branches have risen and fallen, their influence endures, quiet, strategic, and unstoppable. History may forget the battles, the wars, and even the kings, but the Rothschilds' fingerprints remain on the very architecture of modern finance, a testament to what a single family, armed with intellect and ambition, can achieve.